Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Welcome to Huawei Australia ICT Roadshow. It's been my pleasure to be here with you and to share my thoughts about industrial digital transformation. As we all know, industrial digital transformation is truly moving to the next level. For example, in the case of smart cities, the pedestrians' traffic flow data can be collected from street light sensors to enable a better city management. The GE has announced a trial deployment in Tianjin, one of China's metropolitan cities. So in digital oil fields, sensors on oil rigs bring real-time data back to the remote platforms to enable enhanced operational safety and efficiency. In daily life, we all use lifts. So even this century, all technology is experiencing radical new developments. Lifts are now fitted with multiple sensors, cameras, and broadcast systems, connecting seamlessly with remote maintenance system, ensuring ultimate reliability and faster recovery from failure. From the examples given above, we can see that there are some issues for large amounts of industrial terminals and production equipment. Internet of Things is not something new. This concept was raised about 18 years ago, and the awareness of it has been up and down during the following years. What's the reason behind it? First of all, if the network technology did not develop into today's level, there would be no connectivity available to connect billions of devices. After all, it's much more difficult than building the connection between people. Then we realized that in the past, large amounts of data have been generated by terminal devices. However, these data are unable to be processed even if they are connected. The lack of capability to process and analyze the large amounts of data cannot create business value. Today, after years of development in cloud computing, big data, and connectivity, the mature technologies are stepping into every very moment of the digital transformation. From automated to digitized to intelligent, the convergence of IT and OT is mandatory to fulfill the traditional industries in the digital transformation. With the convergence of IT and OT, data becomes a key element of production. The generation, transmission, and process of data needs the collaboration of a cloud, pipe, and device architecture. Several reasons are behind the scene. The first, the cost of the chipset is dramatically down. The size is smaller and smaller, and at the same time, the power consumption is getting lower and lower. Secondly, with the connection technology evolution from 4G to 4.5G, then 5G, it's possible to connect billions of devices. Meanwhile, SDN will simplify the management and make network deployments more agile. Third, and with cloud computing and the evolution of big data technology, we can process the large volume data and most importantly, create business value from it. Therefore, any single technology alone is unable to support the industrial digital transformation. only the convergence of computing power, the connectivity, ubiquitous terminals and the sensors, and the big data analytics can truly build the foundation of digital transformation. With the deep and the continuous convergence of the ICT industry, we are more certain than ever in the profound synergies of our cloud pipe and device strategy and its fundamental role as the key element of digital transformation. BDI, the so-called business-driven ICT infrastructure, is a measure by which Huawei will enable vertical industries to realize the digital transformation. On this picture, you can see it explains the BDI in detail. The left-hand side is the end user, or we call customer. The application developer is in the middle. So the right-hand side is us, Huawei, and this is where we focus on. The key themes of BDI are business-driven and joint innovations. We must have our customers involved in the innovation circle, rather than simply seeking feedbacks. In the middle are our partners. So here, mainly means those application developers and the system integrators. So we will continue to work closely with partners and end customers to deliver the new outcomes through the joint innovations. Huawei's focus is on ICT infrastructure based on our understanding of industry evolution, trends, and customer requirements. We consistently deliver innovation, differentiation, and highly advanced solutions. When we face the opportunities and the challenges of industrial digital transformation, our vision is to create an open platform to sustain a win-win ecosystem. At Huawei, we invest more than 10% of our sales revenue into innovation every year. In fact, we have invested more than $40 billion in R&D over the past 10 years. Based on our cloud pipe and device strategy and innovation capabilities, we will build the open, flexible, secured platforms to enable the rapid industry application development. Our open platforms are designed to drive a win-win ecosystem. We are committed to invest $1 billion worldwide into Huawei's developer ecosystem program for expanded research, development, and innovation. Huawei will continue to focus on industry customers and partners, bring R&D innovation and global experience to the Australian market, tailored to the needs of Australian business. We will leverage this innovation to the benefit of energy, ISP, education, transportation, and other industry verticals, using digital transformation to optimize resource utilization and drive greater production efficiencies. Finally, I'd like to emphasize Huawei's vision. Through the leading new ICT, we would like to build a better connected world. Actually, here, I think I should change the word to a better connected Australia. Together with our partners and with the whole ecosystem. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Enjoy the show. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's great to think about all the advances we can make, how we can become more connected, but the flip side of it is that with advances in digital technology comes the potential for advances in security threats. How do we mitigate risk? I saw a good example of this the other day. I was on a plane and I went to the bathroom and there was an ashtray in the bathroom, and I thought, you've been able to smoke on planes for what, 20, 30 years? Why is there an ashtray? Is this a really old plane or whatever? The reason they have ashtrays on planes, I found out, is to mitigate risk. They know that sometimes, particularly on long flights, even though you're not allowed to smoke on a plane, some people will, right? And if they do, where will they go? They'll go to the bathroom, unless apparently if you're on Air Italia, in which they just go sort of somewhere up the back. I was in the back row of a flight to Rome a few years ago, and just the whole time people just coming up, just thinking I didn't care. No one would notice if we stand at the back. And guess what? No one did, apart from me. But anyway, normally they'll sneak into the bathroom, have a cigarette, and if there's not an ashtray, they'll put them in the little flap there where all the paper towels go, and that could start a fire. So the reason they have ashtrays on planes is to mitigate risk, is to have a system so that if their big system doesn't work, the bad thing that happens isn't that bad. That is, a cigarette goes into an ashtray rather than a cigarette goes, is hidden away somewhere in a flat where paper towels have gone out. So I just thought it was an interesting example of accepting that sometimes your systems will fail and creating a system that ensures that failure isn't that bad. So what are the key cybersecurity challenges facing your organisation today and tomorrow? How do you address them? What lurks around the corner? How can you protect yourself? To discuss upcoming cybersecurity challenges and ways to deal with them, please welcome the man who is both the President of Global Cybersecurity and the Privacy Officer at Huawei Technologies. Welcome, John Suffolk.
Good morning. I'm interested in this mobile phone that counts down from 100 to 0. From a marketing, you think that's a very, very good thing. How many of you would just run? A lot of people would now just run. So every presentation so far has run ahead of schedule, and I will try and break that over the next 30 minutes. What I want to try and do is to talk a little bit about security, more so than privacy, but they are intertwined. And I want us really to think about the world we have just come from and the world that we're going to go to, and you're going to hear a lot about that over the coming hours. But I also want to inject some realism. So let me first of all start off with a question to you all, which I want you to park the answer at the back of your mind. First of all, hands up if you in this room are keeping up with the consequences of the cumulative impact of technology innovation. Are you really, understanding all the things this technology is going to do to you, your family, your business, your company, your country? Hands up. Normally I get someone scratching their head. So what we're saying here already is the technology is outstripping our ability to think through all of the consequences. Now think about, in essence, how much training and work goes into you as individuals, your businesses, in managing this gap between the technology going like this and our ability to understand the consequences going like this. Because the gap is your risk. And in many people in this room, your job is to manage that risk. So just put that to the back of your head for a little while, and I'll come back to that later. Let's look back before we look forward. Looking in the audience, many of you are certainly younger than me, but there are some of us who can remember the, that's gone ahead a little bit too fast. Remember the old PC, the first PC, which really became mainstream some 35 years ago. And you can see over this time how technology has fundamentally changed. To the right-hand side, where there is more compute power in there than you can possibly imagine. Your phones that you have in your pocket have more power and storage in them than I used to use to automate banks in the early 1980s. If you look underneath from the telephone calls, from the very, very first telephone call to the whole issue in terms of smart computers on the right-hand side here, Huawei's product. So the world has fundamentally shifted over this period of time. You can see from a communication, we've gone from kids with string cans, which never really worked, you might as well just shout at your mate, to billions and billions of telephone calls. And if you look at the smartphone device, I had one of those big brick things when they first came out, as many people did, to the thing of beauty, the P9 or the P8, and many other devices that are on the market today. And we should recognise fundamentally Apple, where they changed the whole smartphone market and the technology market with the invention of the iPhone in the 2000s. It's fundamentally changed the world. But you can see from left to right, every piece of technology has fundamentally changed. And whether you think it's evolution or revolution doesn't really matter. And the question is, over the next 5 or 10 years, would we see the rate of change slowing up? Now, I personally have a belief that change is increasing because people are building innovation built on past innovations. You're getting a cumulative impact of the changes that are going on. And what spawned from this is the whole issue in terms of cloud, because of applications. And some of us will remember the old time-sharing bureaus or bureaus of the 70s and 80s. The whole issue in terms of big data, if you go back to the early 80s, you were talking about this marketing concept of one, the marketing of one with big data. But that's now a reality in terms of, as Jan Lida says, big data analytics. You're talking of multiple types of cloud, from the public, the private, the hybrids. You've got multiple devices connecting into infrastructures that you don't really understand and know what those infrastructures are doing. And all this has been built on basic technology over the last 35 years. But let's talk about security. The first virus, as it shows here, coronavirus 1982, followed some years after the creation of the PC, done as a bit of a hoax. But as you can see, some years after, from the Alk cloner, pick any newspaper up you want, some talk about 1 million a day, some vary that number. But the reality is the threat is morphing as we stand here. So as the technology has fundamentally changed, so has the threats. And it's not just on the PCs, it's every kind of technology. From any sort of smartphone, as you can see here, for the first SMS Trojan, the whole issue in terms of big data leak. And it does look as if on some of these things, it is not possible to stop, whether it be a virus, or malware, or data leaks. Now, I won't embarrass anybody in this audience, but nobody would put their hand up and say they do not care about security or privacy per se, certainly if they were representing their company. We might, as individuals, we take conscious decisions on how much risks do we want to take for the reward that we're getting. I like online banking when I'm travelling around the world. I accept I may be taking a risk on there. Some people fundamentally refuse to use online banking. They have a different risk-reward scenario. But as you can see, from every kind of technology, shortly afterwards, which is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, a threat has occurred. And the obvious question is, will that ever change? So, here we have a situation where we invent something, at some point in the future, a threat will occur. Now, can we anticipate every threat that will occur from the technology that we invented? No, even today, we're finding new threats for technology that is quite old. It's not as if people haven't invested, hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of improving this. The reality is we're in a complex world. We would all accept, I think, wherever there is technology, there's going to be a threat. I often stand on stages like this and with technical people, and I ask you a question, 6 people, please come up on stage. I want you to advise the audience on how to buy a PC and secure it. The first one normally says, never turn it on. But I say you are security and technical experts, and your advice to your company is don't turn it on. That's the best we have come up with in 35 years. But the world hasn't stopped spinning, has it? We have continued to make substantial progress regardless of the threat. Because in every business, in every government, in all of us as individuals, we're doing this risk-reward equation. So the reality is, and Mr. Yan Lida talked about this, the world has fundamentally become interconnected and global. And you can be sitting in your vineyard or sitting on the beach, and you could be doing your shopping, doing your banking, running your business. And you really, when you're doing that as an individual, as a company, do not understand the technology infrastructure that you're connecting through to. You do not understand what cloud services that you're connecting into. You do not know in detail the security and privacy that your cloud service provider or your telecommunication provider or your application service provider is performing. You don't know. It's trust. Because again, I won't bore you with 90 pages of terms and conditions when you open up an application that says, please accept this privacy notice, please accept these terms and conditions. And you will all know from your own experiences that whilst you might put a tremendous amount of effort to securing your technology, it's a continuous attention to detail every second of every day. And actually, if you're the chief executive, and some of you may be in this room, you're thinking about how do I increase profitability? How do I increase margin? How do I increase market share? And how much am I putting in just keeping the locks on the doors and windows? And therefore, in some companies, this whole concept in terms of this global world is conflicting with the business objectives in terms of shareholder value. That's the world that we now live in. Wherever there's technology, there is a threat, and you can broadly do anything from anywhere in the world, even though you don't know what the back-end technology is doing. So, the obvious question, and we're going to talk about this over today and so, in the future world of smart cities and smart grids and industrial complexes and Internet of Vehicles and smart homes and hopefully smart people using all of this, how are you going to secure it? So let me ask you a question. How many people in this room are confident you can secure this kind of world? Given the conversation we just had about the PC of 35 years ago. But you're all using some of this. You're all here because you want to use some of this stuff. And this is going to happen because it is happening. And yet 35 years ago we invented something that today, in an absolute sense, we can't secure. But everything on here is happening. Whether you're looking at smart grid, or virtualization, or cloud computing, or autonomous vehicles, or maybe not so autonomous now, but certainly coming to a home near you or a street near you, cloud computing, a whole lot. It's all happening. And do you think this is all being provided by one vendor or 10,000 vendors? So on some of these things, there may be an ecosystem of 100 or 1,000 vendors involved. Let's take Huawei equipment. 70% of what's in Huawei's equipment is not Huawei's components. Only 30% is Huawei. 32% of when you open our boxes of hardware and software comes from America. So do you want me as the President of Security just to secure the 30% that's ours? Or would you look to us to secure 100%? So we say have 1,400 high-tech vendors providing components to Huawei. I have to secure those 1,400 suppliers. But those suppliers themselves will have their own supply chain. So in each one of those issues, you've got this global supply chain providing components, whether they're hardware or software or services. And again, do any of you in this room remember when the first PCs come on, the first thing that was built was emulators to look like a dumb terminal running on a PC? So there'll be a few of you in this room to remember these emulators, and there's a few emulators around today, so your PC can look like an IBM 3700 terminal or something like that. But the problem was that whilst everyone had a very detailed standard, people didn't always implement the standard, so they didn't always work. This is what the book said, but people had a slight variation. So whilst there are thousands of standards that sit behind these, and there's lots of standards bodies, and we may go through some of that later on today, doesn't mean the interpretation of those standards is the same. Again, another question for us to consider in this kind of world where you have cloud, you have data centers dotted around the world, you may have data moving around the world, how do you manage the conflict of law? Again, anybody in this room confident that we'll get lots of governments to agree the same law on data privacy or security or data transfer? Anyone really confident that we can get a lot of governments to agree that? No. So you have a situation from an operational risk perspective that data is moving around the world, hitting different legal jurisdictions, or maybe countries where the law is not as defined, or the law is complex and actually is contradictory, and your services are going to have to operate in terms of that environment. We're a little bit there today, just look at the debate between America and Europe in terms of safe harbour or privacy shield and who has access to what data. There's a lot of work going on in terms of Australia, in terms of privacy and where data can and cannot be processed, and that's a common issue around the world. But the reality is, from an economics, many companies only want 2 data centres or 3 data centres around the world. It's an economic issue. But there's this conflict between economy and security and privacy. So, we've said we can't really secure the PC in an absolute kind of way. Of course we can improve it. And we're moving to a world, and I see no look of confidence on your faces that we can secure this. That's going to be an interesting conversation with your regulators. Because they think from a law perspective, privacy and security is an absolute, it's binary. It's secure. Governments don't write policy which says you don't need to do security, or you only need to do half security, or sometimes security, or sometimes privacy. Policy is written in an absolute sense. So there's this conflict from where government come from, and they have to do some of these things because they're expected to do this, and the reality of where we are from a technology. You can use any numbers you want. But again, nobody in this room, I think, would be sitting here thinking the usage of internet won't grow, the usage of applications won't grow, the usage of data won't grow, the usage of devices won't grow. So this whole connected 5G, IoT, cloud, there's an API for that, there's an app for that, will make the whole issue of security and privacy much more complicated. Because we're running against scale. How do you encrypt terabytes of data in real time? So people say, I want my data encrypted at rest. Very good. How? Encryption takes time. How do you do it? So again, Huawei and others are focusing on how do you come up with new technologies to handle problems caused by the scale of some of these things on this screen. So the reality of the world is quite simply this. In a complex system, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of vendors. And you're not going to be able to say each vendor, each country, each environment is safe and secure. It's not possible. There's going to be many conflicting laws around the world. When I go and check the law in one country, they have, for telecommunications, they have 17 different laws on telecommunications. And when we ask the lawyers to give us a view on a particular thing, we have to go and ask 3 different external lawyers because there's no case law. And they have a different interpretation of those 17 different privacy laws. So you're going to span many legal jurisdictions and you're not going to get agreements. There are going to be, and there are, lots of technical standards. Even on the work we're producing now for IoT and 5G and smart cities and smart cards, lots of work on standards. There's not going to be one. So when you're dealing with the technology, you're dealing with many different approaches to solve the problem, like on identity management. If I'm using a device which is connecting to multiple different end environments, there may be different identity management and encryption requirements. And governments themselves are going to have to rethink their policies to taxation, to inward investments, to this binary view of security versus privacy. Because the reality is the technology is not going to wait for a government policy. You, as companies, will want to invest in products and services that are right for your business and your customers. Whether that's in line with a government policy, that's a different debate. Because we can't have this absolute now that it's binary yes, no, binary yes, no, binary yes, no. The world is not like that. And again, I would ask you, do you think we're going to get governments to agree collectively around the world on resolving all of these issues? We know the answer. The answer is no. It's not happened so far. It's not going to happen in the future because it is too complex. So, some organisations are calling this Industry 4.0, but the reality is it is all real time, it is on demand, it is all online, and it is do it yourself. And with that, you have issues in terms of whose liability is it for privacy and security. You choose the service provider, you choose the applications, you choose the security and privacy, you choose the deployment. What's the service provider's role? And there may not be one service provider because the applications you're choosing may be from 10 or 20 different companies. You may be layering your applications on multiple clouds. But this is the world that we're going to. You'll hear more about that over this conference. And our approach to security and privacy, our laws, our regulations, and our thinking of risk management must focus on this world, not trying to secure the PC of 35 years ago. Because we have a choice here. If we've got limited resource, and most companies I speak to do not have a bottomless pit of resources and technical experts on these things. You have to choose how much effort that you put into securing your past and current world, and how much are you focusing your energies to protect yourself in the world in which you're going, accepting that you may not have all the details of the way that your business strategy will evolve, but there are some generalities that you can understand that you're going to be going. You are going to be more mobile. You are going to have more different kinds of devices. You are going to have more things running on the cloud. You are going to be virtualizing your infrastructures. The list goes on and on. You know this. You may not know the detail, but you know the broad direction of travel. And therefore, focusing on securing the PC is not helping you in managing and understanding risk in the future world. So, this is a bit like whack-a-mole or Dungeons and Dragons. So on the left-hand side, these are the things that we can do to protect the users. Splitting the architectures out, because your shopping list is not as important as your health data. Let's be realistic here. So not all data is born equal, so you can begin to think about how you split information out. The whole issue in terms of what does your network need to do? If I'm driving a car and it's pretty autonomous, latency is very important. If I'm on social media, latency is less important. But we tend to design things to be a hybrid to satisfy all needs. Not just in terms of performance, but in terms of security and privacy. Well, going forward, maybe that's not the right way of doing it. The whole issue in terms of user identity and privacy protection, the whole issue in terms of physical security. But you've got to get data, personal data, sensitive data, from the left-hand side to the right-hand side in an environment that you don't understand, and you don't know all the providers and all of the components. That's your job. That's your job. On the other side here, it's about networks. It's about the cybersecurity, the information security element of it. How do you layer your networks? How do you connect networks together when you don't actually know the trust of an end device? We talk about sensors. Sensors will be done to certain standards. But do you know the provenance of all the sensors connecting to your network? Do you know whether or not they're basically trying to give you a denial of service on those sensors? Because you have low power and low processing capacity. So what can you do with those sensors? How do you design your network to begin to think about, actually, my sensors might be hostile to me. They may well be hostile. You want your employees to be mobile, you want them to be productive, they may be connecting through all kinds of things, and every time you do that, you have to work on the assumption it's hostile. So the way we architect some of these things may well be different. We may be coming from a world where we don't have one network, we don't have a flat network, we have multiple virtual networks, it's hierarchical, it's managing risk in a different kind of way. And whilst we're showing lines and bits and pieces going across the green box in the middle, the issue that we have to consider is what data needs to get from one side to the other safely and securely. It's not all data. What data do I really need to protect? What systems do I really need to make sure that the integrity of the system, the availability of the system is what's needed? If you're air traffic control, availability is very, very, very important. But if you're a different kind of system, you can have a different kind of architecture. So again, I read every paper around the world to do with security, and everyone at some point will say, we do not have enough security professionals, we do not have enough security architectures. Yet the world we're going into is a very different architectured world to the one that we're in today. So the items in 11, in yellow, are the things that everyone's working on now. There are lots of standards bodies, there's lots of groups, there's lots of industry associations that are working to address these issues. But I would just come back to the question about this is where technology is going and this is our knowledge. That gap exists even in the standards bodies. It's a weakness of us all because the invention is running ahead of our ability to think through every single issue. Because everybody wants to innovate. Everybody wants first mover advantage. So, what can you do and we do from a risk management perspective, accepting security can no longer be absolute from a binary, it's 100% secure, it's not secure. The first thing you do is get the hygiene right. The top 35 controls, originally invented in Australia by Defence Signals, is a perfect starting point. Been around now for many years, they've been passed to the SANS Institute, they're now managed by the Internet Council in terms of Washington. Doing the top 4 things on those 35 controls today will protect you from 80% of the threats. And as a bad guy, if you want to read how bad guys do this, they just sit and wait for you to make a mistake. That's it. They don't need zero-day vulnerabilities, they don't need to be smart, they sit for you not to do the hygiene. It's as boring as hell, but it's the thing that enables you to sleep at night. You then need to get the focus right. If you can't manage all data, all systems, all devices, all sensors, because they have different technical requirements, different security requirements, and different privacy requirements, you need to understand where your focus is. And that's not an isolated technology conversation, that's a board risk management conversation. Your board needs to understand where you are really having to protect information, because you can and you must, versus where you are taking a judgment rule. And Pareto's 80-20 rule works very, very well. You need to get your vendor decision right. We published a white paper, the top 100 questions you can ask your vendor. Then we were not popular with our friends in the industry for issuing 100 questions to put in your bid documents. Because for us, if we're going to collaborate in terms of security and privacy, you really need to drive the quality of the technology across the whole industry, not just from the vendor side, but the service provider. Look at those 100 questions, because we give you what the question is and why you should ask that question of your vendors. Build it into your RFPs and your RFIs. because it's forcing them to answer the question which I'm standing up here today and asking you about. The next thing is about the whole issue in terms of governments getting their policies right. Policies are written in a black and white binary thing. Do this, don't do that. And governments, when they begin to not understand the way the world is moving and begin to become a little bit more don't do this, or you must keep coming back to us to check on various things. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the reality is that technology is no longer designed on a black and white, yes-no kind of model. It's much more complicated. And therefore, in essence, governments need to think through how they're going to work in a world where, in essence, they can't see what their attack service is. They can't see what the components of the vendors are. They can't see where the services are being provided. Last but not least, we spend an inordinate amount of time, rightly and understandably, solving today's problems, buying today's security solutions to stop the malware, to stop the attacks, to stop the intrusion. And I accept all of that. But your business is planning its future strategy. It's planning its future products, its future customers, its future services on future technology. And you need to invest some of your time in terms of understanding how you're going to do that and how you're going to manage risk, not stop risk. So, finally, as you can see, we really shouldn't be worried about technology and risk, because the world fundamentally has been reshaped from benefits of technology, whether it be education or health or farming or communications or security and privacy. Business won't stop adopting technology because of risk, and therefore we have to learn how to manage it. So let me just finish here on a few notes. I have 3 seconds left. Security has always followed technology, and there will always be risks following the invention of technology. You need a forward-focused paradigm. You can't keep looking back. You can't drive a car by looking in the rear-view mirror. You have to look forward to work that you have to do. You need an unhappy relationship with your vendors. Governments need an unhappy relationship with their service providers to drive security up. And if we begin to look forward and address this, it's not absolute, then I think we can fundamentally capitalise on the benefits to come. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.